Thank you, Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Scott, members of the committee. What an incredible opportunity to be able to discuss the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party in general, but to American agriculture in particular. I want to thank the governor for her leadership in really sounding the alarm about this threat, and also for carrying the burden of dealing with Dusty Johnson before he leaves the room. He may not technically weigh that much, but that's a heavy burden. And I believe he is from your Dakota. I always get it confused. A year ago, a gentleman named Xiang Hitao, a PRC national, pled guilty to conspiracy to commit economic espionage and was sentenced to more than 2 years in prison for stealing intellectual property from his employer, which was a Monsanto subsidiary. Xiang took copies of the algorithm on a one-way flight back to China, where he later worked for the Chinese Academy of Sciences Institute of Soil Science. So here you have an example of someone stealing American technology and bringing it directly back to the Chinese Communist Party, which reflects the CCP's approach to agriculture and food security, in that it's not just about economic competition. To quote General Secretary Xi Jinping himself, it is a national security issue of extreme importance. The PRC is the largest importer of corn, soybeans, wheat, rice, and dairy products in the world. The CCP views food security as an existential issue. She understands that if China were to invade Taiwan, it would be subject to blockade and economic sanctions, and therefore the PRC would face massive challenges in feeding its population. So to put it bluntly, the Chinese Communist Party is actively engaged in economic warfare against the United States, and our agriculture sector is already a prime target. The governor mentioned the share of U.S. farmland owned by Chinese-linked firms increasing more than fivefold between 2010 and 2021. These are only the acquisitions that we know about. There could be much more because, as you all know, the federal oversight system for reporting foreign ownership is alarmingly lax, and enforcement is very minimal. For example, the governor referenced the issue with the Fufeng Group, which attempted to purchase land close to Grand Forks Air Force Base in the other Dakota in 2021. They did not report the purchase to USDA until the U.S. media started asking questions about it. That's unacceptable. If you look more broadly at the entire CFIUS process, at least 3 problems emerge. One, the U.S. government has no way of tracking land purchases by foreign adversaries. There was a recent GAO report that found USDA is incapable of properly tracking such land purchases by problematic actors. Second, even upon discovering a problematic transaction, CFIUS often finds it has no jurisdiction, despite the fact that in the FIRMA bill, we tried to give CFIUS said jurisdiction. So just as happened with the Fufeng acquisition, because the Air Force Base in question was not listed as a sensitive site by CFIUS, CFIUS claimed they had no authority to even review the transaction. That's unacceptable. And third and finally, CFIUS can't review greenfield investments in our farmland or consider our domestic food security as a risk factor. So our foreign adversaries are able to purchase thousands of acres of our farmland, and CFIUS can't even consider the potential impact on our food supply. This strikes me as something that Democrats and Republicans could come together right now in this Congress and solve by passing something like the Protecting U.S. Farmland and Sensitive Sites from Foreign Adversaries Act. I know there are members of this committee on both sides of the aisle. Ms. Slotkin and I have worked very productively on this issue. This is something we can get done even in divided government. Give CFIUS the authorities and resources it needs to make sure that our foremost adversary can't buy land near critical infrastructure and military bases. It should be a no-brainer. I would also suggest we can do better in protecting our agricultural IP by passing bills like the Biosecure Act, which my ranking member, Raja Krishnamurthy, is a co-sponsor of. This would ensure that U.S. taxpayer dollars don't go to CCP-backed firms like Beijing Genomics Institute that want to collect the genetic sequences of plants and animals from American farmers. And on the flip side, we should protect our food security for generations to come by cataloging the genetic sequences of U.S. plants and animals that we need to help American families, keep American families fed. So in closing, I would just say I spent a lot of my time as chairman of the Select Committee on China asking why any of this matters. Why are you having this hearing? Why do we care about the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party? And it's not just that they're stealing our intellectual property or trying to dominate our food supply. I really do think, and I don't think this is alarmism, I think this is a recognition of reality if you read what Xi Jinping is saying to the party and to his people. I believe that the CCP is preparing for a war with the United States. There's no doubt they would prefer the fruits of war without the actual costs. That is to be sure. But they are preparing nonetheless. And he has told us repeatedly that he is prepared to use force if necessary to achieve his lifelong ambition, which is, of course, taking Taiwan, thereby dominating the region and ultimately displacing the United States as the most powerful country in the world. So if we want to avoid that outcome, which would be a terrible outcome, a war with China would be horrific if you've ever participated in a war game. And I know there's many on this committee that serve that understand the costs of war. We have to abide by the old adage. If we want peace, we must prepare for war. And that is the challenge, to mobilize our colleagues and our constituents to do difficult, costly, but important things that put us on a path to deterring war. Thank you for having this important hearing, and thank you for letting me go a little bit longer.